Good morning. Today we're going to start a new novel. It's called The Mostly True Adventures of Homer P. Fig. We're going to begin with a quick write. It says, describe a time when you stood up for someone or someone stood up for you. What was the situation? How did you feel afterwards? Make sure you write 3 to 4 sentences. Press pause to write and then play when you're ready to begin. Our focus question today is, what are the characteristics of nonfiction? What details does the author use to reveal the setting of the story? Before we can look at this second question, right now we're going to look at the purposes. That shouldn't say nonfiction, that should say of historical fiction. What are the characteristics of a historical fiction text? We're transitioning from nonfiction to historical fiction, and we're going to figure out what the differences are. Before we answer our question, let's preview some vocabulary that we're going to use in our whole group lesson today. The first one is scrawny. It's when someone is pretty weak. It's the opposite of strong. So that's picture 2. Abide, to be unable to tolerate someone or something. So it says keep calm and abide, like try to tolerate something. When someone gets on your nerves, it's hard for you to abide or tolerate them. And then number 3 is lynch. That's when you kill someone by hanging them, and that's going to be in our story. Pretty depressing, I know. Alright, first we're going to take some notes on historical fiction. Fiction stories have, we know, CSPS plus T. So the C stands for characters, the S stands for settings, the P stands for problem, and the S stands for solution. And we also know that if you put all of these things together, the character, learns a lesson and there is a theme. Historical fiction is a subgenre of fiction. So it is fiction, but it's a special type of fiction. And we're going to read this article and answer these 4 questions. Historical fiction. And the first question we're looking for is, why is historical fiction written? The genre of historical fiction in the field of children's literature includes stories that are written to portray a time period or convey information about a specific time period or historical event. Usually the event or time period is about 30 years in the past. So when we're thinking about why it's written, it tells us these stories are written to portray a time period or information about a specific time period. So that's our answer to 3A. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep going. Some well-known examples of Karen Cushman's Catherine Called Birdie and The Midwife's Apprentice, and Christopher Paul Curtis's The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, and Bud Not Buddy. In historical fiction, setting is the most important literary element because the author is writing about a particular time in history. The information about the time period must be accurate, authentic, or both. To create accurate and authentic settings in books, authors must research the time period thoroughly. They must know how people lived, what they ate, what kinds of homes they had, and what artifacts were a common part of their lives. Let's go to 2B. What literary element is the most important in historical fiction? Okay, if we go back, it says the setting is the most important literary element. And that's because the information in the time period must be accurate, authentic, or both. So authors must research the time period thoroughly. Press pause to write down your answer for 3B and press play when you're ready to keep reading. Historical fiction books, whether they are picture books, transitional books, or novels, may have characters who are either imaginary or who actually lived during the time period. Settings also may be real or imaginary. The plot events may be documented historical events or they may be fictional. If they are fictional, it means the author created the events for the telling of the story. The fictional characters, settings, and plot events must be portrayed authentically as if they actually could have happened. Let's go to box 4. What makes the story fiction in a historical fiction text? Okay, well, it says historical fiction books may have characters who are either imaginary or who lived during the time period, and the setting may be real or imaginary. So it makes it fiction is that the characters and the setting could be imaginary. And then it says the plot and events may even be fictional. So the characters, the setting, and the plot may be fictional. Write down your answer for 4A and let's look for 4B. What makes the story historical in a historical fiction text? I'm going to change the color of my highlighter. Let's keep reading. A classic example of historical fiction is Johnny Tremain, a 1944 Newbery Medal book. The primary setting is Boston, 1773. The book contains both real and fictional characters, the real and fictional setting, and real and fictional events. The book is successful because the author, Esther Forbes, extensive historical research and knowledge of the time period and her skillful blending of history and fiction into a believable story. So let's back up. What makes the story historical? And if I go back into this paragraph, this last sentence says, the fictional character, setting, and plot events must be portrayed authentically as if they could have happened. That's what makes it a historical fiction text. And then you need to write your paragraph. What are the characteristics of historical fiction? Explain your answer using evidence from the text. So you need to explain how the characteristics of historical fiction are similar to fiction. However, right, it's written for a different purpose, and there are parts of it that make it historical. Silently write your paragraph. Go.